I remember the exact sound of the pen rolling off the edge of the marble table. That small click, like something inside my life, had just cracked open. I was sitting in the hallway outside our attorney's office, staring at a folder that was about to erase 10 years of my existence. My marriage, my home, my company, everything I had built from nothing was reduced to a stack of papers waiting for my signature. One signature. That's all it would take to hand her everything she ever wanted. And I was ready to do it. Or at least, I thought I was. My name is Daniel Mercer. I'm 42. I built a logistics company in Texas from a 2-truck operation into a regional chain that now moves freight across 5 states. I used to believe that discipline and loyalty were the same thing, that if you gave your life fully to something or someone, it would eventually give back. I learned the hard way that life doesn't work like that. Especially not love. Especially not her. Samantha, my wife of 9 years. The woman I once believed was my safest place in the world. We had been in divorce mediation for 3 months. 3 months of lawyers, emails, silent dinners, and carefully measured lies. She said we had grown apart, that I was never present, that she needed freedom. I told myself I understood. Men do that. We rationalize pain when we can't afford to collapse. But what I didn't know, what I couldn't see yet, was that freedom wasn't what she wanted. She wanted everything I had built. And she had already been planning it long before she ever said the word divorce. That morning, the air outside the building felt heavier than usual, like the sky itself was holding its breath. The attorney's office sat in downtown Dallas, glass walls reflecting a world that looked too clean for what was about to happen inside it. I remember checking my watch more than once, even though I wasn't late. I just needed something to occupy my hands because my mind wouldn't stop replaying the same thought. If I sign this, it's over. Not just the marriage. Me. Samantha arrived 10 minutes before I did. Of course she did. She always liked to control timing, entrances, exits, conversations. She wore a cream-colored blazer, hair perfectly straight, not a strand out of place. If I didn't know her for 9 years, I would have thought she was walking into a business meeting, not the final collapse of a marriage. She smiled when she saw me. That smile used to calm me. That day, it felt like a warning. "You're early," she said softly. I nodded, didn't sleep much. "Neither did I," she replied, as if we were still sharing something instead of dividing everything. That was her talent, making destruction sound like intimacy. We were called in together. The attorney, Mr. Halbrook, laid out the documents like he was arranging a funeral. Neat stacks, clean lines, no emotion, just consequences. "There are 2 copies," he said. "Once both parties sign, the agreement is final." Final. That word echoed in my head longer than anything else. Samantha slid her chair closer, just enough for her shoulder to almost touch mine. "We can make this painless," she whispered. "No need to drag it out." I looked at her hands. Those same hands that once held mine in hospital waiting rooms, in airport lines, in the quiet moments when life felt bearable. Now they rested calmly on a document that would dismantle me. I picked up the pen. And that's when something inside me started to shift. Not loudly. Not dramatically. Just a hesitation. A crack in obedience. The attorney began explaining the final terms, but his voice felt distant, like I was underwater. My focus drifted to Samantha's reflection in the glass wall behind him. She looked too calm. Not nervous. Not grieving. Prepared. There's a difference between someone letting go and someone letting you believe they are. And in that moment, I realized something I hadn't allowed myself to think before. She wasn't losing anything today. I was. I signed the first line. My name looked unfamiliar as it landed on the paper. Daniel Mercer. It used to mean something. Now it looked like a surrender. I moved the pen again. Second line. My hand paused just slightly. That pause should have meant nothing. But it did. Because that's when I heard it. Not in the room. In the hallway outside. A voice. A man's voice. Low, familiar. laughing. And then, Samantha's laugh answering it. Not the polite kind she used with me lately. Not the rehearsed one she wore like makeup. This one was real. Light. Intimate. Alive. I stood up before I realized I had moved. "Excuse me," I said, already walking toward the door. "Mr. Mercer," the attorney called behind me. But I didn't stop. Because something about that laugh had done what months of doubt couldn't. It had pulled the truth into the light. The hallway was quiet. Too quiet. And then I saw them. Samantha, standing close to someone I recognized immediately. Mark Dalton. My business partner. The man who sat across from me in meetings. The man who helped design half the expansion strategy that made my company what it was today. His hand was resting against the wall beside her shoulder. Too close. Too comfortable. And Samantha. She wasn't stepping away. She was leaning in. I froze. Literally. In the middle of that hallway, with legal documents waiting behind me and my entire life about to be signed away, my body stopped obeying me. Because my brain finally caught up. This wasn't just divorce mediation. This was coordination. Timing. Planning. Betrayal that had been rehearsed long before I ever walked into that room. Mark saw me first. His smile faded instantly. Samantha turned. And in her eyes, there wasn't shock. There wasn't guilt. There was recognition. Like she knew this moment would come, just not exactly when. "Daniel," she said carefully. My name sounded different in her voice now. Smaller. Weaker. Like it belonged to someone she had already stopped respecting. I looked at both of them. And for the first time in years, I didn't feel confusion. I felt clarity. Cold. Sharp. Unmistakable. I had been walking into a settlement. But what I had really been walking into was a setup. And I was one signature away from handing her everything. Until I froze in that hallway. The silence in that hallway didn't last more than a few seconds, but it stretched inside me like hours. Samantha straightened her blazer as if nothing unusual had happened. That small movement, so controlled, so rehearsed, told me more than any confession ever could. People don't fix their clothes when they're innocent. They fix them when they're caught almost too early. Mark stepped slightly back from her, but not far enough to pretend distance wasn't already needed. "Daniel," Samantha repeated, softer this time, "this isn't what it looks like." That line. That exact line. It should have made me laugh. Because every liar thinks the problem is perception, not truth. Not reality. Just what it looks like. I didn't answer immediately. I couldn't. My mind was replaying everything at once, like a film that had been edited wrong from the beginning. Late nights she said she was tired. Weekends she suddenly needed space. Phone calls she took in the other room. The new password on her phone. The sudden interest in separating finances just to be safe. At the time, it all looked like stress. Now it looked like preparation. Mark cleared his throat. "Dan, we should talk privately." That was almost funny. Privately. As if privacy hadn't already been the problem. As if I hadn't just walked out of a room where my entire life was being quietly divided like property in a storage auction. I looked at him. My business partner. The man who knew my systems, my contracts, my weaknesses. The man I trusted enough to give access to everything. And now standing next to my wife like this wasn't betrayal, it was routine. "You two want to explain something to me?" I asked finally. My voice surprised even me. It was calm. Too calm. Not broken. Not loud. Just flat. Controlled. That kind of calm usually comes right before something irreversible. Samantha exhaled slowly. "We didn't want you to find out like this." I nodded slightly. So there was asterisk a better way. Mark stepped forward half a step. "It's not what you think." I cut him off instantly. "No," I said, "that's exactly what it is." And for the first time, neither of them responded. Because there was nothing left to reframe. Behind them, the glass wall reflected all three of us. A perfect triangle. Me in the center. And I finally understood something that made my stomach drop, not from sadness, but from realization. This wasn't a sudden affair. This was structure. Samantha didn't accidentally end up close to Mark. Mark didn't accidentally become involved in my business decisions. And divorce papers didn't just appear after emotional distance. Everything had been aligned. Carefully, quietly, systematically. I took one step back toward the office door. Samantha noticed immediately. "Where are you going?" I didn't look at her. "I'm done signing," I said. That was the first real shift in the air. Mark's expression tightened. "Daniel, if you walk away from this mediation, it'll get worse for you." That sentence should have scared me. But instead, it clarified everything. Because threats don't come from innocent people trying to resolve misunderstandings. They come from people who already know they have leverage. I turned back slowly. "Worse for me," I repeated. Samantha's eyes flickered, just for a second. "Not fear. Calculation. You don't understand the full picture yet," she said carefully. That phrase again. Full picture. Like I was missing information. Like I was the one who hadn't been paying attention. But the truth was simpler. I had been trusting the wrong narrative. And they had been writing a different one entirely. I walked past them without another word and re-entered the mediation office. The attorney looked up immediately. "Everything all right?" I didn't sit down. I placed the pen back on the table. Slowly. Deliberately. Like I was returning something borrowed. "No," I said, "everything is not all right." Samantha and Mark entered behind me a moment later. Their presence felt heavier now. Not emotional. Strategic. Like they were entering a negotiation that had already been pre-calculated. Mr. Halbrook glanced between us. "We can pause if needed." "No pause," I interrupted. My voice was sharper now. "I want copies of every document again." Samantha sighed. "Daniel, this isn't necessary." I looked at her. And she stopped talking mid-sentence. Because something in my expression had changed. Not anger. Not panic. Something colder. Something that had just stopped protecting her from consequences. "I said I want everything reviewed again," I repeated. Mark shifted uncomfortably. "That's not how mediation works at this stage." I finally smiled. Just slightly. Not warmth. Recognition. "Oh," I said quietly, "then maybe we should talk about how this asterisk actually works." And that's when I noticed it. The attorney didn't look surprised. Not fully. Not like someone hearing a new development. He looked prepared. Like he had been expecting this exact disruption. That was the second crack. The first had been in the hallway. The second was right here. And I realized something that made my chest tight, not with emotion, but with awareness. This wasn't just betrayal between a wife and a husband. This was coordination between multiple people. Possibly even legal alignment. Which meant one thing. I wasn't walking into a divorce. I was walking into something structured enough to strip me clean. Legally. Financially. Emotionally. Samantha placed her hands on the table. "Daniel, please don't make this harder than it needs to be." For a moment, I just stared at her. Because I remembered who she used to be. The woman who brought me coffee during late-night work sessions. The woman who laughed when I forgot my own anniversaries, but still stayed. The woman I thought I knew. And then I looked at the woman standing in front of me now. And I understood something I didn't want to accept. One of them had never been real in the way I believed. I leaned forward slightly. And said the words that changed everything. "Show me everything you've been hiding." The room went completely still. The moment those words left my mouth, the room changed. Not physically. But something in the air tightened, like a wire being pulled too far. Samantha didn't move. Mark didn't speak. Even Mr. Halbrook lowered his pen, just slightly, as if he was no longer sure whether he was an observer or a participant. "Show me everything you've been hiding," I repeated, slower this time. Not louder. More controlled. And that control did something none of them expected. It shifted the power. Samantha exhaled sharply. Daniel, this is unnecessary drama. That word. Drama. Like I was the one disrupting something normal. Like betrayal only became real when it got inconvenient. I turned my head slightly toward her. If it's unnecessary, then there shouldn't be anything to show. Mark stepped in again. This isn't about hiding anything, it's about procedure. I cut him off without looking at him. Stop talking like you're in charge of my life. Silence again. But this time, it wasn't confusion. It was restraint. The attorney finally cleared his throat. Mr. Mercer, if you're requesting full disclosure, that will require. Do it, I said. No hesitation. No softness. Just decision. Samantha's eyes narrowed slightly now. You're going to drag this out over pride. That hit differently. Because she was trying to reframe me again. Turn my awareness into ego. Turn my refusal into emotion. That was her pattern. And I was finally seeing it clearly. I'm not dragging anything, I said calmly. I'm stopping something. Mark let out a short breath. You're making a mistake. That phrase again. Everyone always says that when they lose control of the outcome. I turned to him fully now. For months, I said, you've sat in meetings with me, told me what we were building, what we were expanding, what risks we were taking. I paused. And all this time, you were standing next to my wife outside mediation offices. His jaw tightened. That was enough answer. Samantha stepped closer to me. You don't understand what you're doing right now. There it was again. The assumption that I was still missing something. That I was still one step behind. But something had shifted inside me since that hallway moment. I wasn't behind anymore. I was just uncovering what had already been done. I understand enough, I said quietly. And for the first time, she looked unsure. Just for a fraction of a second. But I caught it. Mr. Halbrook finally opened a file on his desk. We can request financial transparency reports, communication logs between legal representatives, asset documentation. I nodded once. Start. Samantha turned sharply toward him. That's not necessary. We already submitted everything required. I looked at her. And that was the moment I realized the most important truth so far. She wasn't worried about truth. She was worried about exposure. Then it won't be a problem, I said. The attorney hesitated, then began typing on his laptop. The room shifted again, subtly, but I felt it. Because now something irreversible was happening. Documents that had been carefully filtered were about to be expanded. Systems I had never seen were about to be opened. And people who had been very comfortable with partial truth were about to lose control of the narrative. Mark stepped closer to Samantha. Maybe we should take a break. But I laughed. Not loud. Just enough to interrupt the tension. A break, I repeated. From what exactly? He didn't answer. Because there was no good answer anymore. Samantha's voice dropped slightly. Daniel, you're going to regret pushing this. That line should have sounded like concern. But it didn't. It sounded like warning. And warnings only come from people who know what they've already done. I stepped closer to the table, placing both hands on it. Then show me what I'll regret, I said. The attorney finally spoke again, carefully. Initial asset review shows restructuring activity within your business accounts over the past 4 months. My focus snapped instantly. 4 months. That matched the timeline. She started becoming distant. Samantha didn't react immediately. But Mark did. Just a small shift. A breath held too long. And I saw it. The confirmation before the explanation. What kind of restructuring? I asked. The attorney hesitated. Transfers, reallocations, partial ownership adjustments. I turned slowly toward Mark. He looked away first. That was enough. I felt something inside my chest tight, not emotional yet. Strategic. Because I suddenly understood something I hadn't before. This wasn't just personal betrayal. This was financial positioning. Samantha finally spoke again. You were always too focused on expansion. You didn't read what you signed. That sentence landed heavier than all the others. Because it implied something worse than betrayal. It implied opportunity had been used against me. And I started remembering. Late-night agreements. Fast-tracked approvals. Trust-based signatures. Things I never questioned because I trusted both of them. You used my trust, I said quietly. Samantha didn't deny it. She didn't need to. Her silence said more than any confession. Mark finally spoke, more defensive now. It wasn't like that. I raised my hand slightly. And he stopped again. Because I wasn't asking anymore. I was understanding. The attorney slid a document forward slowly. This is the preliminary ownership structure post-divorce filing, assuming no contest. I didn't look at it immediately. I already knew what I would see. But I looked anyway. And there it was. Reductions. Transfers. Adjustments that shifted control away from me in ways that looked legal on paper, but only because they had been prepared in advance. Samantha watched me carefully now, waiting. Not for emotion. For reaction. Because she still believed I would break the way I used to. But I didn't. Instead, I straightened slowly. And said the words that changed the direction of everything. Call my legal team. And for the first time, her expression stopped being controlled. The moment I said it, call my legal team asterisk, the atmosphere in the room shifted again, but this time it wasn't subtle. It was immediate. Like a door had just slammed shut on the version of events Samantha and Mark thought they controlled. Samantha blinked once. Your legal team, she repeated, almost reflexively. Daniel, this is already your legal team. I shook my head slowly. No, I said, this is your legal process. That distinction landed harder than anything else I had said so far. Because it broke the illusion. Mr. Halbrook looked between us, suddenly less certain. If Mr. Mercer is requesting independent counsel, that will pause proceedings. Samantha's head turned sharply toward him. That's not necessary, we're already mid-settlement. But I didn't look at her anymore. I was already reaching for my phone. And that small motion, that simple act of choosing something outside of their structure, did something I didn't expect. Mark shifted again. Uneasy now. Not confident. Not controlled. Just aware. I've already sent a message, I said quietly. Samantha stepped forward. Daniel, don't turn this into a fight you can't finish. That sentence. So carefully chosen. So revealing. Because it assumed I was still operating within limits she understood. But she didn't realize yet. I had just stepped out of those limits. The phone buzzed almost instantly. One reply. Then another. And then a call request. My attorney. Not theirs. Mine. I didn't answer yet. I just looked at it. And for the first time since this started, I felt something I hadn't felt in months. Not anger. Not sadness. Clarity backed by structure. Samantha noticed the screen. Who did you call? I finally looked at her directly. And I said, someone who actually reads everything before I sign it. The room went still again. But this time, it wasn't tension from uncertainty. It was recognition that control was slipping. Mark exhaled sharply. Dan, you're overreacting. This can still be handled cleanly. I turned toward him. And smiled slightly. You used that word earlier, I said, cleanly. I paused. Tell me something, does cleanly usually involve moving ownership behind someone's back? He didn't answer. That silence again. The kind that confirms instead of denies. The attorney at the desk cleared his throat awkwardly. If new counsel is involved, we will need to halt any finalization of asset transfer until review is complete. Samantha's composure cracked slightly now, not fully. But enough to see. This is unnecessary delay, she said more firmly. But I noticed something important. She wasn't arguing the facts anymore. She was fighting time. My phone rang. I answered. Yeah, I said simply. A familiar voice came through immediately. You didn't sign anything yet, right? That was all I needed to hear. No, I said, but I was close. A pause. Good, my attorney replied. Don't sign anything. I'm pulling the full audit now. Give me 10 minutes. I looked up and saw Samantha watching me carefully. She knew something had changed, but not what yet. I ended the call and placed the phone face down on the table. Slowly, deliberately, Mark stepped forward slightly. What's happening? I looked at him, and for the first time, I didn't feel like I needed to guess his role. I think you already know, I said. His eyes tightened. Because he did. Samantha finally spoke, but her voice was lower now, controlled again but forced. Daniel, whatever you think you've discovered, you're misinterpreting it. I shook my head. No, I said, I'm finally interpreting it correctly. That difference mattered. Because for the first time, she didn't have a response ready. The attorney's laptop chimed. He looked at the screen, then paused. That pause lasted only a second, but it changed everything in the room. What is it? I asked. He hesitated before answering. There are additional filings attached to the restructuring. Samantha's face tightened instantly. Mark didn't move. And I realized something very clearly. Whatever was coming next, they already knew existed. They were just hoping I wouldn't see it. What kind of filings? I asked again. The attorney swallowed slightly. Third-party authorization agreements, business delegation clauses, and temporary transfer signatures. That last phrase hit differently. Temporary transfer. That meant access, control, permission, not just divorce paperwork. Something more strategic. I turned slowly toward Samantha. And for the first time, I didn't ask her anything. I stated it. You didn't just plan to leave, I said quietly. You planned to take control before you left. Her silence confirmed it. Not because she admitted it. Because she didn't deny it. Mark finally spoke again, quieter now. Dan, it was supposed to stabilize everything. I laughed once. Short. Sharp. Stabilize, I repeated. I shook my head slowly. You used my own company structure to stabilize yourself. That was the truth forming fully now. Not suspicion. Not theory. Confirmation. Samantha stepped forward again, but slower now. We were protecting assets if the divorce got messy. I interrupted her instantly. No, I said. You were positioning assets before the divorce got contested. That difference mattered. And she knew it. Because now there was no emotional framing left. Only intent. The attorney closed his laptop slightly. At this point, I strongly recommend pausing all proceedings until independent verification is complete. Samantha looked at him sharply. That's not necessary. But her voice didn't carry the same certainty anymore. It carried urgency. Fear of exposure. I picked up my phone again. Another message had come through. From my attorney. We found something bigger. Stay where you are. I read it twice. Then looked up slowly. And said the only thing that mattered now. Looks like this isn't over in this room. The room didn't move after I said it. Not because nothing was happening, but because everything was happening at once, and no one wanted to be the first to admit it out loud. Samantha's eyes locked onto mine, and for the first time since this began, I saw something underneath her control. Not confidence. Not strategy. Tension. Real, unfiltered tension. Mark stood slightly behind her now, no longer like an equal partner in whatever this was, but like someone suddenly realizing he had stepped into a situation bigger than he fully understood. And me. I wasn't frozen anymore. I was watching everything finally line up. The attorney cleared his throat carefully. Mr. Mercer, I think it may be best if all parties take a formal recess while legal review is conducted. Samantha reacted instantly. No. Just one word. Sharp. Final. But it came too fast. And that speed told me more than anything else she had said today. People don't rush denial, unless they feel time slipping. I leaned back slightly in the chair, studying her now instead of reacting to her. No, I repeated quietly, that's interesting. Her jaw tightened. What is? I nodded once toward the documents on the table. You've been controlling this entire process like it's already settled, I said, but now suddenly you don't want to pause. A beat. That means something changed. Mark shifted his weight. Dan, you're reading too much into this. I cut him off without looking. I'm reading exactly enough. Then I finally turned to him. And this time, I didn't just see my business partner. I saw someone who had been inside my systems. Inside my trust. Inside my blind spots. The phone on the table buzzed again. I didn't pick it up immediately. I already knew it was him. My attorney. But I let it ring. Because something inside me had shifted completely now. I wasn't chasing answers anymore. I was waiting for confirmation. Samantha noticed the phone vibrating. You're stalling. I looked at her. And for the first time, I didn't feel emotionally pulled in any direction. I'm not stalling, I said calmly. I'm watching your reaction. That landed differently. Her expression flickered. Just slightly. But enough. The attorney's printer suddenly activated in the corner. Paper began to feed through. Slowly. Then faster. Mark glanced toward it immediately. What's that printing? But the attorney didn't answer right away. He looked at the screen first. Then back at me. And that hesitation told me everything. Samantha stepped forward, stopped the process. But he shook his head slightly. I can't. Mark frowned. Why not? The attorney finally spoke. Because Mr. Mercer's legal team has initiated a full forensic audit request. Silence. Not confusion this time. Impact. I stood up slowly. Not abruptly. Not dramatically. Just decisively. A different kind of presence filled the room now. Not emotional escalation. Structural reversal. Samantha's voice dropped. You escalated this behind my back. I shook my head. No, I said, you built this behind mine. That sentence finally broke something in her expression. Not completely. But enough to show cracks. Because she understood what I meant. I wasn't reacting anymore. I was reconstructing the timeline. Mark finally spoke, quieter now. Dan, listen to me. I looked at him. And for the first time, I didn't give him the benefit of interpretation. Did you authorize those transfers? I asked. No emotion. Just precision. He hesitated. That hesitation answered louder than words. Samantha stepped in immediately. Those were protective measures. I raised my hand slightly. And she stopped. Not because I controlled her, but because the room had shifted enough that interruptions no longer worked. I looked at both of them. And I finally said what had been forming since that hallway moment. This wasn't a divorce plan, I said slowly. It was a takeover plan. The word *takeover changed the temperature in the room completely. Because now it wasn't personal anymore. It was structural. The printer stopped. The attorney picked up the pages. He scanned them, then looked at me, and said the words I will never forget. Mr. Mercer, you were right to stop signing. A pause. There are active attempts to transfer controlling interest in your company through legally binding authorization chains initiated during your marriage period. Samantha went still. Mark didn't move. And I felt something inside me settle, not collapse, not panic. Clarity. Cold, absolute clarity. I nodded slowly. So that's what this was, I said. Not a question. A confirmation. Samantha finally spoke, but her voice wasn't controlled anymore. It was urgent. Daniel, listen to me. This is not how you think it looks. But I didn't let her finish. Because for the first time, I didn't need her explanation. I already had the truth forming in front of me. I picked up my phone again. Opened it. Looked at the screen. And said quietly, call whoever you want. I paused. But this time, I'm not the one signing anything. And as I walked toward the door of that office, leaving behind the papers, the silence, and the people who thought they had already finished writing my ending, I realized something they hadn't. The story wasn't about losing everything anymore. It was about who had been quietly building the plan to take it. And now, I was the one rewriting it.